We'll move right into number 9, Superintendent's report. Dr. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board and our community. It's such a great honor to be here today and to recognize the undefeated season for the Chapin Middle School girls basketball team. As always, we are a system guided by 3 critical questions. Why do we do this work? How do we accomplish this work? And then what are our outcomes? The vision is that we love and grow our students. The mission is that we're focused on academic, social, and emotional growth and development. And then our outcomes are guided by our strategic plan with the objective that every student feels loved in our schools and every student has demonstrated academic growth in our schools. And we measure these through 4 performance goals as outlined in our strategic plan. We have outlined this year, designated as the growing season for 2023-24 school year. And as we are required by the state of South Carolina to do 3 assessments throughout the year, we use our measures of academic progress from fall to winter and spring. You compare the number of students that were off grade level last year to those who were on grade level last year in the fall. You can see that we are indeed in the growing season. If you look at the winter off level from last year to on level projections to this year, you can see that we are in the growing season. And so we're very proud of that. One of the measures that we look at every week is our weekly graduation rate report. This is a composite put together by our high schools as we track to ensure over 1,400 or about 1,400 students are ready to graduate on time. We have a goal of 90.5% as our graduation rate, currently fluctuating here, but looking to find the names behind the numbers and the stories behind the names so that we can meet those challenges and help those students succeed. So very proud of the work that our schools are doing. We've seen last year the number of dropouts decrease, but we're working each and every day to make sure that our students are hitting this really to surpass the objective and goal we set. So when we look at our state measures, we can see that all measures are increasing. This is the growing season, with the exception of 1, our grad rate, which is maintained. So we're very proud of the work that our teachers are doing, our staff, our administrators, those who work in schools to support them, our volunteers. It is a full community effort to see this growth in our school district. And so we're certainly very, very proud of the growing season in School District 5. So at this time, I want to ask our interim CFO, Ms. Marty Rawls, to come to the lectern to go over our monthly financials for December.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair and fellow board members, Dr. Ross. We have the monthly financial updates, through December 31st. Okay. Just use that button right there. Okay. I know that Ms. Wilkerson had given you all a head up about the revenue. I need to go back one. We'll look at expenditures first. Okay, in looking at the expenditures, we are tracking the same as we were last year. We're about 0.5% lower at the same time we were last year, but everything else is tracking right at the same percentages. As far as the revenue, I know Ms. Wilkerson had provided you all with some information. It's not, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The revenue one's, there it is. Okay. The regarding, there were some questions about the tax revenue coming in timely. We did have a very large deposit for the month of January, about $28 million from Lexington County. So when I compare it at the same time as this year to last year, we are gotten back on track with that. We will be 58% received as of the end of January. That will cover all of the January 15th regular receipts. So we are actually in a better position than we were the same time last year. Does anyone have any questions on the expenditures or revenues to date?
On the revenue, the interest is obviously a great deal more than budgeted, and I'm assuming that's because the interest rate is
Yes,
higher.
ma'am.
So, and this may be a Dr. Ross question, do we just hang on to that or, and save it for next year or we at some point decide to use it for some area of need?
Yeah, I think anytime we're looking within the year, we want to see what our end-of-year picture looks like as we prepare the budget for next year. So that's our goal. Ms. Rawls knows we're looking for our revenue streams for next year, and that way we can make more definite decisions on how to use any pluses or minuses.
Yes, ma'am. And also the state revenue was budgeted a little higher than we're actually realizing. So it's going to be a little bit of a net in there. It's not exactly one-to-one, but that will help cover some of the shortfall on the state aid to classrooms revenue. All right. So now we'll look at the ESSER quarterly update. This is ESSER 3. This will be the last of the ESSER funding. This program ends on September 30th. Did talk with Ms. Larkin today, who does a lot of the tracking for our ESSER programs. While we are showing $4 million remaining, a good bit of that has been, in fact, the majority of that has already been allocated to certain programs. We don't have purchase orders on them yet, therefore it is not what we call committed. So actually we have about $400,000 that is available to go and supplement other programs. So things that are not included in the commitments up here are the summer reading camp for this coming summer, a lot of tutoring for the balance of the school year, academic enrichment camps. There's still some salaries in here, a good bit of programs through our student services area with our 4K program and with our adult ed and the mental health counselors. So there's still a good bit that's going to happen through this. We are, we have asked a lot of our bookkeepers to go ahead and get the plans through the rest of this funding program and have that done to us by March 15th with purchase orders issued by March 29th. We don't want to be sitting here end of August trying to figure out how we're going to spend additional funds. So we're trying to get everything sewn up as much as we can ahead of time so that we'll be ready and have the funding available in the right categories. Any questions on the ESSER?
So just to make sure I understand, so even though it's showing about $4 million left, in reality, most of that's really been committed, so there's about $400,000 left, and you guys are getting requests on any reallocate or how to use that money, or what's the plan for the $400,000?
We're working to, kind of like I said, sew everything up by the end of March as far as what the plans are going forward, and then we will be able to look at other areas that we can continue to supplement that are ongoing projects. So it may be that we need to put some more money into library books. Like I said, I know there are several collections that are a little bit behind where they need to be, and they have been supplementing that along, so that's always a good project that we can supplement there. So anything that, for what I feel like, anything that can help us for years to come. I don't like the one-time things. I like the things that will continue to pay back over time.
I'm just curious, sort of piggybacking on what Ms. Huddle was saying. The deadline on September the 30th, is that the deadline for payment or is that for contractual?
It's the deadline for performance.
For performance.
That's what they call it. So we will still be able to claim this after September 30th, but we have to have everything purchase ordered. Does not have to necessarily be on site, but all purchase orders have to be issued and have the funds in that committed column before September 30th.
So if we had something at the beginning of the school year and we saw that there was a deficiency or something, we would have time, even if it, whatever we went with didn't occur until afterwards, as long as we've committed that money by September the 30th.
Correct. The problem happens when we don't have opportunities to do budget amendments timely, because we have to have all those done by a certain deadline, which is before the September 30th deadline.
Sure.
So we really are working to get everything identified as quickly as possible so that we're not sitting here then trying to fit things into something that we already have allocated versus actually getting what we really need.
I just want to make sure we're doing all that we can so we don't have to return.
We do not want to
We do not
return,
want
not
to
even a penny, no. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rolls. And moving on, I'd like to just give an update. As you know, we have been doing community meetings and getting input on our 5-year master facilities and rezoning plan. I've opened up our presentation by saying we're writing this in pencil while we're in the public, getting feedback so that we can put together a better plan in ink and with pen. So we appreciate, as we moved around our Office of Communications, setting us up with abilities to speak to different groups throughout the community. It has been a huge effort from all of our staff, from Student Services and Planning and Operations, as we go around and have this discussion. Always opening up with why change. Change is hard, especially change to the unknown. And why do we need to change? And our community is changing, and so we must prepare in order to meet that future. We've identified 3 problems that we're facing, and you can look at a problem or you can see it as a challenge where there's an opportunity to overcome that problem or that challenge. And so these 3 challenges give us 3 opportunities. 1, the condition of the school buildings in the Dutch Fork and Irmo attendance area. And as you have been presented, in October of this school year, the 2023 MPS study has identified $30 million of critical or their level 1 capital facility needs. Tonight we'll go over the $15 million that we'll use in capital funds, but if you look at the level 1s and level 2s, that's about $101 million combined. Not all of the $15 million goes to capital, leading to this deferred maintenance or run-to-fail system in a lot of our maintenance protocols. With that, the enrollment and capacity issues in the Chapin attendance area. We are estimated through the same study to receive increase in 695 students for the 27-28 school year, the majority of those students to live in Chapin. And also, what I think was the most important, or all of these are equally important, but not to be overlooked, are the future workforce needs for our children. We all heard a presentation of how the baby boomer generation is retiring at the rate of 10,000 per day, and making sure that we have to fill those positions, our students that are primed to fill in those highly technical and entrepreneurial skills that are required for their futures. We realize that four-year college, while is a great option, is not the option for all children. So creating multiple off-ramps so that our students can be successful in meeting the needs of the community. And so with that, we recommend a fix and fill plan. A fix and fill plan without increasing the tax rate is living within our total collection means. This is to take place in the 2026-2027 school year. When we talk about fixing, as we present it to you, the composite scores of all of our buildings, 25 of these were rated, 23 schools and 2 office buildings. And you can see the lowest score of that composite is a score 2, where those buildings are rated, and the highest score we received on our buildings was a score 4. So you can see where these are located. But part of fixing it is not just returning it to code, but looking at the instructional plans that we put in. And so Ms. McCaskill and her team led in looking at what are some of the innovative things that we're going to need in the future for our children. And so for the Dutch Fork High School STEM program, that upgrade would be digital solutions and AI. For Chapin High School, rounding out its instructional program on a fine arts center. and at Irmo High School, a small business incubator to support the entrepreneurship program there. For all students right here on this site would be a construction and infrastructure lab to support the needs of our students to be able to fit those clogs in the pipeline of the workforce that we see for surveyors and operators and construction workers. We are working very hard as we look at different ways to prepare our students at scale for these positions. So the next question is, how do we fill our schools? If you look at this chart, it just shows we've seen that over the years, the last 10 years, this movement from the highest in-person enrollment in our schools from Dutch Fork to Chapin. These figures include the Spring Hill High School in the Chapin attendance zone and Crossroads in the Irmo attendance zone. But if you were to factor those schools out, the narrative is still the same. If you lived in our community for some time, let's go back to the 80s, late 70s and 80s, you'll see that at that time, all the students lived in the Irmo area, and that's where the buildings were built. And then you move up to the 2000s, and you'll see that in late 90s, 2000s, everybody was in the Dutch Fork area, and that's where the buildings were built. And now you fast forward to today, and everyone's moving to the Chapin area. And the question is, do we continue to build buildings out there? And I know if you see us as 3 different attendance areas, it makes sense to just build another building there. My vantage point is as the whole body. One of the things that we're seeing in our maintenance program is as the body grows, the heart must grow in comparison with it. The heart is what fuels the body, what feeds the body. And if your building envelope grows and your operational capacity does not meet it, then you're not able to feed the entire body. And that's one of the things I worry about as we talk about building more of that require new staffing and new administration and new operational needs, is that we would have to also make sure that we're increasing that operational capacity for that. So the plan that is being proposed is to look at our existing facilities, making sure that we can fix and fill our existing facilities. That would require zoning back into those buildings. When we talk about filling, we're filling with the understanding of 3 different terminologies and capacities. Theoretical, which we don't operate under, but that's taking a building with 10 rooms and packing it with 25 students in each class. In that case, you would have a theoretical capacity of a building at 250 students. But we offer programs. We offer services like science and art, and we offer special education services. We have 2,588 students receiving special ed services with 13 different variations of services that they can receive. And so all of that plays into the part of extra spaces being needed to provide these services for these students and programs. As a result, the same facility with an increase in programs would offer 50 students less in terms of capacity. But we try to help our teachers by looking at class sizes. For instance, our Title I schools are limited at 18. And so with that same building in this scenario of target capacity would be 144 students. So it's important as we look at filling schools that the administration is working diligently to ensure that the programs, the services, the offerings, the exploratories, the electives that are provided to our students, that we can continue that at the District 5 expectation. So when we plot that with the looking at our what we call full pool, this is based on the MPS study, what we are preparing for, you can see that this being over or in the red or pink or red is not where we want to be, and that there's space that if you look across as a district as a whole, there's an opportunity to fix the schools in the Dutch Fork, Irmo area and fill back. This would impact the Ballantyne Elementary area the most, as we empty that building, so to speak, by rezoning the Ballantyne students into River Springs, Oak Point, and H.E. Corley. By doing that, we can now use 4 buildings to serve the population of Chapin Elementary students that currently we use 3 buildings to serve. Once we do that, we have a unique opportunity where CIS and CMS now can be middle schools serving the middle school population, which at that point would lead to how do we address the Chapin High School issue. This is what we look at today. So even as we prepare for the future, we see the same issues that are present with us today. And so what's important to understand about our rezoning plan is that 99% of the students will keep their original high school zone under this proposed rezoning plan. We actually did some preliminary numbers. I think it's really 60 students that are in that 1%, so it's really 0.3%. 99.7% will keep their original high school. Right now, our latest numbers indicate about 0.3%, but will be rezoned from Dutch Fork High School to Chapin High School. And so I'll still keep it as 1% because there could be some fluctuation in there. But as we heard at our latest meeting with the Chapin Chamber, those concerns about rezoning, yes, it affects elementary and middle, but we have done a very, I think, important job of ensuring about the high school zones. Also, there's no plan to remove existing 3K and 4K programs. I think that was one of the questions that was brought up, and so there's no plan to remove those existing programs. As we look at our map that we are currently operating in, we know that this doesn't support the future growth, as we saw by those red dots. So the plan that we are working with now, this is the draft plan. We will work for a March 11th meeting to get more and more detail for our board and community consideration. But this is a plan that puts the 5th grade back into all of the elementary schools to comply with our grade structure. So our community has been very supportive in giving feedback. And that's what we like. They've engaged, I would say, in giving feedback. One of the recommendations is to provide mental health services and supports for students impacted by rezoning. And we continue with our focus on mental health and just want to reiterate to all of our families that we have our clinical counselors or school counselors, Care Solace, which specifically address emotional, psychological, and social well-being. We see movement a lot already, even before rezoning. The school most impacted by the movement of students is Seven Oaks Elementary School, which we see almost 40 to 42% of that school change over within a year. So our staff has a lot of experience working with students who are moving to different schools. Another recommendation was the grandfather families that have been impacted by rezoning, and we are committed to continuing to be a school with choice and magnet offerings. Right now, we are drafting the preferred choice options for those families impacted most by rezoning. And then also, we don't want the 5-year plan to, we want the 5-year plan to be before the 10-year plan, but we do understand in the 10-year plan, you're going to have to do something with future growth in Chapin. And that could mean another building, or because we see a peak and then a falling off in population, adding on to our existing buildings. And so that would be a way that, again, we don't have to build a brand new building in the 10-year plan, but have the ability to add on to a Piney Woods Elementary School or a Chapin Elementary School or a Lake Murray Elementary School. So these gives us some options. So these have been great recommendations, discussions about proximity to schools. All of these recommendations are coming in, and we think they're very, very important. So we have a very unique grade structure. I think not only in terms of resource allocations, but supporting schools as we look at the different grade structures that we have. Our goal is to align this for better utilization of our resources. And so what does that look like? And he's taking the building of Ballantyne Elementary School out of that Dutch Fork area, rezoning its students into Harbison West, H.E. Corley, and Oak Point. Now that building of Ballantyne would serve the elementary students of Chapin, which would create an opportunity to create 2 middle schools in Chapin to address that middle school overcrowding issue. With the high school, it is to remove the Academy for Success from Spring Hill and allow students to increase the enrollment at Chapin Middle School and the new Spring Hill Middle School to fill every spot that the Academy for Success has vacated without, and I'll say this again, without diminishing the number of seats that are currently offered for Dutch Fork and Irmo. Also, as we look to move east, Dutch Fork Elementary School, a brand new Dutch Fork Elementary School, will allow any needs to slide east to be absorbed in a building that would meet their needs. And so the existing Dutch Fork Elementary School would house all of those programs that allow us to maximize our space: the Academy for Success, the 5 program, and adult education. So with this plan, we move from this structure to this structure, where we are K through 5 with our 3K, 4K programs, 6th, 7th, and 8th with all of our middle schools, with CIS returning to Chapin Middle School being proposed to be Spring Hill Middle School, Dutch Fork Middle, Crossroads Intermediate moving from a 1 grade level school to a 3 grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th school, and an Irmo Middle, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And we can see the Crossroads is the only school that would serve 2 high schools as students from H.E. Corley move through Crossroads back to Dutch Fork. Again, in this model, we have 99% of the students keeping their high school. The only, that 0.3 or that 1% is the students who remained at Ballantyne Elementary that would be going to Chapin. And so one of the things that I think we need to look at is there are certain things that are out of our control that are also impacting us. Route 76, or the Broad River Road widening project. This project is coming, I think, to begin next year, next spring. We can already see, you can go on the properties, you can see the new road marker, and if you are standing at it, you can see how much of the campus that's going to take up with that new road. To be familiar with it, it's 2 lanes now. It will be going to 4 lanes plus a median, and that will be out front of Dutch Fork Elementary School. If you look at the new right-of-way marker, you can see that's right where the buses are. And so this presents some operational challenges. If you're familiar with the Dutch Fork Elementary School, we are very landlocked. It's our oldest continuous use building in the district, a lot of historical significance, but also its access to the main road from that point is very limited. With this, we could no longer put the buses in front of the building for pickup. We're just too close to the road. And so at that point, we have to make a decision about parent drop-off, bus pickup. We're in a unique place. So one of the benefits of going to that plan is to avoid this inevitable change to our community and to our building. If I take a picture out front here, you can see new road markers on that campus now, behind the flagpole, behind the well, I would say marquee, but the sign for Dutch Fork Elementary School. So this is part of that penny tax for Richland County. It's a Richland County project, and they'll start moving the utilities, and so we'll start seeing that next summer, and then we're told about 24 months of work there. So these are projects that we should be aware of as we're planning our work for our fix and fill. So the options is that we can pursue the referendum, or not pursue it, or one can fail. But we have structured this within the same tax levy for debt service, 69.5 mills. So whether it passes or it fails, the mill rate is going to be the same. Let's talk about what happens without a referendum. Growth is coming regardless, and so we are going to have to prepare. And so one of the things that we're looking at is we cannot guarantee the 99% plan if it does not pass. And as a result, as we still work at these models and work on these lines here, we'll present for the board what the new lines would look like. But the goal would be to preserve Spring Hill as a magnet, but the Academy for Success would stay in Spring Hill. Dutch Fork High School, which has room, the students who were going to Chapin, we would have to take a part of that population into Dutch Fork High School. Crossroads would send more students who potentially could go to Dutch Fork High School into Irmo High School, so we do have some structural options there, but the adult education program would stay at Irmo High School, and the 5 program would stay at Piney Woods. So again, we're working to provide both of these options, but this is what a scenario looks like in the event that we do not pursue or there is a failed referendum. So with that, there's a proposed facilities planning timeline. We'll add the road improvements in that as well. Tonight will be our first discussion of our capital projects. This helps us devise what our potential referendum question would be. If you approve what we are proposing, we're starting to knock out some of these 1s and 2s on the MPS report. Then we'll get into our budget. The goal of putting this question on a November ballot. With that, if we do our due diligence ahead of time, being in a position to start in January would be ideal. We want to use the 2025-26 school year as a year 0 for transition, making sure the staff, the programs, the equipment, the students, the administrators, all are in place, that you get a chance to meet the new schools, meet the new teachers. Everyone is in place so that we can have a smooth transition of all resources in the fall of 2026. So we have put out for continual feedback, and I want to thank the community because they're really engaged. We're working to answer all of these questions as they come to us. A lot of them are very global, and some are about their dinner table, and we respect all of those questions. So you can email us always at 5yearplan@lexridge5.org. And so I'll pause here before concluding the superintendent's report for any questions about the 5-year master facilities rezoning plan.
Do I have any questions, Dr. Ross? Mr. Satterfield?
Actually, I have several, and they're not in any particular order. Some of these are some that have been shared with me, and then other things I just sort of thought through when I was doing my homework and then listening to your spiel. Now, the 8% capital projects, will that eliminate, or is there a chance that that'll eliminate some of the issues or some of the things that to be addressed with the referendum?
Correct. So what we're looking at is, if you go back to that facilities conditions report we did in October, we identified 11,137 items. We're working on that list now. So that's what you'll see today when Mr. Wiseman presents that. And will it knock down the entire list? No, but it's starting to address some of those items.
I was just curious. I know that sometimes they go hand in hand, and I know with MPS's study, I didn't know if they may have included some of those very projects that were to be addressed through capital.
That's correct. The only thing that we don't have would be anything that we presented new, any new buildings or new instructional programs. But in terms of how they broke that down in terms of site or building envelope, safety and security, all of those recommendations you'll find incorporated in today's presentation on capital.
And like I said, they're not in any particular order. The projects, I've looked at the MPS 5-year assessment, and I know they're very bland right now. They're not as specific, which leads to a question. At some point in time in the near future, will we get a more specific list of the projects, or when they finish, they've gone through their study completely, and I know things will have to be bid out and proposals and things like that?
So we have two things. I just want to make sure we have a school-by-school document of 1 through 5s for every school site, all the 25 buildings. That's a very detailed list of all of the items you would have by category. And then what we're starting to work on now is what a potential referendum question would be. And that's what we'll have. It is our goal by March 11th, March 25th, and April 22nd, those meetings, that you would have 3 reviews of those of that list. But we wanted to start the first one on the 8% money today.
Having gone through the construction issues with schools, do we have many projects that are going to be quite large so that it interferes with the operation of the school based on the feedback that you've gotten from MPS? And
Mr. Wiseman, if you want to address.
I mean, I was looking at just the widening of that road.
Yeah.
That's Fork Elementary School. That's going to be that's the only access road to the.
And I'll let Mr. Wiseman throw him out to the wolves on this one. But I can tell you, we can't really promise, especially with shorter summers, no impact. So it's always how do we work around this. But Mr. Wiseman, you can share.
If I could say, the sooner we know we have the capital budget, the better we can start getting the bigger vendors in, get quotes in, and then plan that during the summertime with understanding that we have limited time to get up on roofs and start doing major construction. So we would identify those areas first, the ones that we know are going to take longest. A lot of it has to do with roof repair and in some cases pulling up driveways and stuff like that to fix those. So we're targeting the bigger pictures during the summer, and we're always hitting smaller targets. I will say this, and I think I shared it with Dr. Ross, but that picture is of basically 1 July from MPS. So in my mind, I'm already adding everything that's become or not working since 1 July till today. So this list is ever evolving. So we are trying to, we went back out to the schools, and I'll talk about this in a minute, got their requests. We're looking at MPS, but we're also looking at still what we're doing on regular general maintenance, trying to tie that in so that our number ones are our first priority.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question is because I was looking at this 5-year assessment from MPS, and some of the things talk about some pretty major, I mean, window, exterior doors and windows and roofing, and and I know you were going to have a plan. I was just curious. It would be interesting to know. So when asked about some of that stuff, how we could sort of share with the public on some of that. So that's the reason I asked earlier if there was will we receive a sort of a prioritized list or a list of the actual projects that were going to be addressed?
I will present you a Plan A, but I will always have a Plan B and C. That's just my military background, because Plan A never works. And, you know, there's difficulty sometimes getting vendors, getting parts. You know, as we went through COVID, we found a lot of delays in some of that stuff. So we will always present you with what we think is a solid list, but always have an idea of what we can do with if that doesn't go well. And it is about the timing, getting it into the summer. Now think about this, all the districts across the state are also coming up with a similar plan about doing big projects during the summertime. So we're competing against a lot of other school districts for specific vendors.
Okay. Only got two more. One is, have we found or have a pretty good idea of the site for the new elementary school?
So we are evaluating multiple sites. Board policy, I think it's FEE, site acquisition, gives us the authority to move up to letter of intent to purchase. We will present that to you in executive session. We do not use our name when we engage in that. So you will be presented, as the policy says, with up to 5 sites. The reality is we only have about 3 potential sites that we can present you. So as we are prepared to, do due diligence. And so we want to make sure, as that policy outlines, that the sites that we present to you have cleared due diligence for environmental issues, for transportation issues, I think DHEC as well.
Yes, sir, DHEC, DOT, those people have to be involved. Now, of course, OSHA, not OSHA, but Office of School Facilities.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Office.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Huddle.
I actually have a request related to something that Mr. Satterfield said. I think it would be really helpful if someone could take the MPS report, I think in terms of Excel, so have all the 1s and 2s by school listed out, and then columns for the dollar amount and where that dollar amount is. Is the dollar amount, you know, $500,000 for windows or whatever, and is that in the proposed capital budget, or is that in the bond referendum, or is it not anywhere yet? Because one of my fears is that, as a board, that, and there may be good reason, that we don't address some items on there. I know the district paid for an MB-Con study, and then there was a lot of, well, why didn't you guys fix it? So I think we just have to be really clear, what did they recommend and where is it? And if it's not anywhere, I'm sure there's going to be a good reason, but that we know that kind of up front.
Amen. And I would think as we look at today's capital presentation, your feedback on how we present this is going to be important, because that's going to be the format in which we present any referendum. So we started out with MPS as our guide, knowing we are holding this document that says these are critical needs. And so looking at, one, that's our prioritization list. So if anyone in the community asks, well, why are they going with this? A third-party evaluator of engineers and architects said these are our #1 items. So we've used that. You know, as an operator of school, as a principal, you may be looking more internal or custodial matters, but you don't know structural or what plumbing is or what the roof looks like. Or you might have been on the roof, but most principals aren't. And so knowing those things are important. So today's capital presentation, we have used the format from EPS so that you can see how we're prioritizing and addressing those to knock as much of it off during capital as possible, so it does not have to go there. But to something Mr. Wiseman said, and I think it's an asterisk that we need to put, we use static numbers, but that's not reality. So when they came out this summer and did the assessment, they said at that point it was 34 million, or it was 62 million or 67 million for the level 2s. But those numbers are moving, so just keep in mind that by the time we go out to bid on some of these things, those numbers may have changed.
Dr. Ross, I've got one question for you. On your graph for the proposed educational structure with no referendum, in the event that this comes to fruition, would there be any redrawing of the lines of elementary schools? Or would we be looking to keep the same lines for elementary schools? It's just where those elementary schools are going to flow into what feeder?
Very good. This chart could be misleading to think that the lines don't change, but the lines would change in both scenarios. So with the referendum, you've seen our recommendation for the lines changing for elementary school. Without the referendum, you'll still see the changing of the lines for the elementary school. Our issue is that with the referendum, the high school lines don't change, with the exception of that. We say 1% with that 0.3%. But with what we're working on now is how do you, Chapin can't handle a class of 600. So how do we use Dutch Fork to address that? So students who would currently be going to Chapin in one model going to Dutch Fork and vice versa. Kids in Dutch Fork may be going to Irmo. So we're drawing that line for your review.
Any other questions? Mr. Scully?
Yeah, Dr. Ross, on one of the, I know you've been addressing feedback. One of the comments that kind of got my attention was from someone who asked or had a situation where their children were going to go to elementary and middle school with a certain population of students, but then I believe in the email it was they would go to high school with a completely different group. That kind of resonated with me. Have you guys, how do you address that with folks where that happens, and have you analyzed the extent to which that will happen under the proposed plan? And I would think we'd want to minimize that.
That's correct. To not put Dr. Harris on the spot, but we have been playing this kind of Rubik's Cube with it to minimize that. I think we're now at about 170 students of impact in that area. Dr. Harris, do you want to speak to kind of how we're looking at that zone there?
Absolutely, and you're right. We're right at about 172 students that have a direct impact based on the current proposition, the plan that's been proposed. 60 of those, as Dr. Ross mentioned, we're looking at primarily K2. So that's what we're looking at there when he mentions that number. You know, ideally, when you look at a rezoning or redistricting option, you want to, in the very best case scenario, keep as many of the whole neighborhoods to let them move together, as opposed to splitting neighborhoods, certainly splitting streets and things of that nature. And that's what makes it very challenging and very difficult to move an entire neighborhood as opposed to half of the neighborhood, a portion of a neighborhood. So we work and very diligently to try to keep communities together if in fact a move is necessary. We're pretty good at that, but I won't say that it's picture perfect in terms of being able to pull it off in either scenario, whether it passes or whether it does not. I do anticipate that there will be some case and points where it may not be a perfect match, and the entire neighborhood may in fact have to, we may have to split a neighborhood. That is very possible. That is very possible. I don't ever rule that out, but just know that if you take anything away from the comments, is that with our very best intent, we want to move entire neighborhoods, keeping students together if in fact a move is necessary.
Yeah, no, and I understand that there's not a perfect plan where nobody's impacted in that kind of way, but to me, that's a pretty critical time period when you grow up with the same set of friends, and then all of a sudden at high school you've got nobody, and that's a pretty tough adjustment. And so I would hope we'd do everything we could there. The other question, Dr. Rawson, this is kind of what is our I'm thinking from a contingency, but if knowing how important to our proposal passing a referendum is, I worry that that it won't, and then the position that we'll be in at that point. But if we had to, what is the capacity to expand Chapin High School itself from not just I know the land capacity and then, structural and resources. What does that look like?
That's a question I think we can put a little bit more study in. I think for us we would be totally, and I'm looking at Marty Rawls at that point, we'd be totally maxed out on our 8% borrowing capacity. I think right now we're at about 95% of our ability. So we wouldn't have the funds to build on it. What we're also finding is that adding on to an elementary school, square footage wise, is a much better use of our resources than what we're seeing the prices for middle and high school. And so our goal in the 20-year issuance of the referendum debt is that we could create a lot more opportunity in the later years to be able to have 8% capacity to build on to our existing elementary schools in Chapin. So, to your point, we can certainly look at it, but the costs associated with building on an active site and trying to add on to that would be very limited.
I understand. I was just wanting to know kind of is that available from
parachute
just
plan.
ultimately what's driving my question is in the event that it doesn't pass, I agree with what Ms. Huddle said at the last meeting that Spring Hill is just a gem of a school. And I think I want to do everything possible to protect what we have with Spring Hill. As a full magnet, we have people coming in nationwide to try to replicate what we already have with that school, and for us to do anything that would jeopardize that's why I was looking at if we absolutely had to expand in Chapin without touching Spring Hill, what's our capacity to do so?
One of the things, and that's a good point I'll speak directly to, as part of the reason our capacity is kind of full up right now is due to the IRMO project. And so we have some options because you have a new wing plus the old wing. So you could, essentially you have Dutch Fork that can move into IRMO and move Chapin into Dutch Fork. So there are some options there before you have to touch the Spring Hill program, but we're gonna push option A. But there are some contingencies if it doesn't pass.
And I do have one more question if nobody else has any they'd like to interject with. Dr. Ross, you probably don't know this answer off the top of your head, and I don't expect you to, but do you know when the last time our district actually redrew the lines, not for the necessity of filling a new school?
Dr. Harris, do you know the answer?
Roundabout. Correct. Yeah, I'm more so referring to redrawing lines to fill, correct.
I bet it was Dutch Fork when they built Dutch Fork High
But
School.
that would be to fill a school, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, that's to supply a need for a school that we've built. And I get we have to make these decisions, of course, for that. I guess the question I've got that leads into that is that, redistricting is something that the proverbial can's always kicked down the road. Everybody talks about it, no one actually wants to make that decision. With the plan that we have in place with a referendum and also without a referendum, what would that do for our enrollment numbers with existing portables at our schools? Would we still need those, or would we have enough relief to where?
We have drawn this plan when NPS has looked at capacity. They've included portables in our. So we have not. We didn't plan to add any more, but without one, I'm not going to take anything off the table. And I think one of the issues we have is once that line is drawn, and you start looking at what's the reality of the growth of Chapin, we're going to need some options. And that's why I really like that opportunity of adding on to our existing Chapin schools in the 10-year plan, because we would add on building brick and mortar versus portables. But without that, seeing the growth rate now of what that would look like, that 10-year plan, we're going to need some options there.
And I say that, I mean, obviously, it's a decision we have to make, and, you know, I want it to be a 20-year decision, in my opinion. So I want to make sure that the plans that are put in front of us have a solution for longevity, to where there's, you know, somewhat of an understanding when you move into this community what school your kids are going to go to.
Amen. And I think one of the things that with the referendum, in terms of the 20-year lines, now that we're talking about adding on to the buildings, you would know that this is the Chapin Elementary Zone. And if it expands, we just expand the building. But this is the Pineywood Zone. If it expands, we just add on. But we would use, and I think, I'm not trying to put Mr. Rawls on the spot, but I think we start picking up capacity in 2030. And that's with spending referendum money. So now we can bring to that board options of where's the growth going? Is it more in Lake Murray? Is it in the Piney Woods area? Is it in the Chapin Elementary area? And now, how do we cast forward which building we're going to add on to? And that way, it will protect those existing lines that we move to with this plan.
This might be more directed towards Ms. Rawls. With our current 8% capacity, I believe Dr. Rawls said 2030 was when we'd start to see some relief. Does the board have the ability to, whether it be a just millage, to pay off early in order to is that an option? Not to say it's the right option. I just don't know if, are we handcuffed for 30 years, or not 30 years, but until 2030, or do we have?
Increasing millage is always an option. It would depend on restructuring that debt. So we would have to confirm with our financial advisor through the bond indenture, does it allow for the early redemption of bonds, and what does that look like? So there would be pieces that we would have to review before we know that we could pay it off early.
Okay. And I guess one last caveat to that, with, I believe, is it Lexington County that's reassessing? Will that potentially, if they reassess our buildings, obviously the value's gone up over the past couple of years, would that potentially open up additional 8% money with, of course, our building valuation going up?
As long as the growth, as long as the assessed value goes up, yes, that does help with the 8%.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I would like to end with, we tell our D5 story. I would like to end with our D5 history. And on Saturday, we had the opportunity at Irmo High School Center of the Arts held from the African American Historical Society of Irmo, their Black History celebration, just to talk about so much of the history that exists in our community. Dr. Harris was able to attend as well, and it was a great program that was put on, but a lot of history was shared. One thing, and I'm not Dr. Van Holden, who did a doctorate on this, but talked about the impact of Mr. Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington to our community. Booker T. Washington famously said, if you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. And he worked with Julius Rosenwald, who was the CEO of a company named Sears and Roebuck, and was a philanthropist. And during the early 1900s, right about 1917, created a fund to build schools for black children in the South. I think he is credited for some 4,978 schools that were built throughout the South. To this day, only about 500 of those buildings still remain. One of those buildings is in our community. And that's just an amazing history. In 1918, a church on Broad River Road, St. Peter's Baptist Church, donated land. And that was one of the deals about this fund that was set up with Julius Rosenwald. He was from Chicago, but he would set up the fund, and the community had to match. sweat equity, land, money, but it wasn't just, it was a community effort. And what was beautiful is that all of the Rosenwald buildings, you could have these unique window structures because they didn't have electricity and to let in the light. And so in 1953, the Rosenwald School was given the name of Rich Lex High School. And it became Rich Lex until 1968, in which it turned into Irmo Junior High School. And then later in 1971, it became Dutch Fork Elementary School. But we have in our community a very historic relic. Again, it's only 500 of these, 10% of these have existed, and one is right here in our community. And I was telling Dr. Harris, I was moved to tears because this school hasn't existed for 56-something years in our community. And Saturday night, the alumni of Rich Lex stood up and they sang their alma mater. And they sang it as if they have been practicing every day since it has. And so it just shows you that these schools are brick and mortar, but they also have a spirit in them, a sense of community and camaraderie that lives today. And I just wanted to, as we talk about our D5 story, our community is just rich in D5 history. So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, that is our D5 story, and concludes the superintendent's report.